Hello YouTube and Facebook friends and acquaintances. So I just wanted to update what's just happened to me for the second time in the last few weeks. I'm going out each day at the moment for a walk just to get some good exercise, as is a legal right and part of a recommendation to keep active. I have been respecting people's beliefs to have a social distance, but I've been going out and exercising, but also sitting down in the park. As you can see, it's quite a large park, a large field. A field that's ideal really because there's so much room in it. People can keep a relative social distance from each other because there's so much room to accommodate it. But for the second time in the last few weeks now, I've been asked to move on by the police. And it's a bit concerning really. They stopped me to say you're not exercising, so either keep going or go home. And that's the I'm really concerned about that. I didn't stop to argue because I didn't see any point to do it really, because they obviously know I believe it's very safe. There's no real risk sat alone, a very safe distance from anyone in fact, and no risk to or from anyone. And so, I mean, they obviously knew that because I was sat there. The fact that I'm sat there means that. I know that they're sort of going around asking people to sort of move on and not to sort of sit down in a park. But it just seems irrational, doesn't it? You know, what on earth is going on here? People are being moved on for just sitting down in a park. Who are, a safe distance from other people. Is, quite irrational, and really concerning actually. And I don't know how widespread this is. Obviously other countries are in a total lockdown, where people like in Italy and Spain can't even leave their house at the moment. And it's really concerning. I personally don't see the medical evidence to justify that at all at the moment. I don't see it as a dangerous enough pandemic. I just see it as something that is affecting a minority of people who've got compromised immune systems, like many other flus and other infections. And just think these measures are really severe and just totally extreme and unwarranted. And I think a house arrest, I will consider it a house arrest if that's the measures that are introduced. And people quite innocent of any crime being locked up in their own homes. And my heart goes out to those going through that in Italy, France, Spain. From what I've heard, I've read accounts from people online already in that situation. All I can say is that I've been out each day, and whatever my beliefs are, I've kept a relative safe distance from other people. I wouldn't invade other people's personal space anyway, to be honest with you, and I don't. So I've been erring on the side of caution in that respect. And in fact, from what I've witnessed, everyone else has kept a safe distance from each other also. I haven't witnessed anyone invading other people's private space. Although I'm sort of a bit limited. I've only sort of been out in a local park, but I must have seen a large number of different people, but all kind of relatively on their own in small ones and twos. There's been a few kind of small groups, but that's very limited, the exception of the rule. And they may well be housemates as far as I know. I don't know. But very concerning times going on here. And I just think it's just really sad, actually. And I suppose it's all too tempting to get worried about what could happen, where this could lead to increasingly draconian measures being introduced that aren't being, as I see it, evidenced and justified by scientific evidence. And if you have extreme legislation coming through, where police have the rights to move people on who are just sat down peacefully in a park, and people in other countries not even allowed to leave their home, if you have extreme measures like that, I would think that there was a duty to have good justification for that, where you have strong evidence that can support that. And having reviewed the evidence that I have seen so far, I just haven't seen that yet. And that's what's deeply concerning to me, I suppose. But I mean, yeah, there are lots of people going out, but I think that's kind of normal. It's been very good weather here, and that's, you know, it's quite regular that people would want to go out and enjoy that. You know, I think the long-term effects of people being isolated at home, you know, physically, mentally, socially, emotionally, you know, not to mention the economic consequences, you know, the long-term consequences of all that will be a lot worse than the alleged infection that is said to be treating. You know, if the cure is actually worse than the thing you're treating, you seriously have to question that, really. You know, very concerning times that we're living in, and but I will you know, keep you updated and posted about anything else that happens. I mean, I suppose, like, if I look at it from one point of view, it's, you know, in the short term, it's not that concerning. You know, a few weeks being locked in your housebound is not necessarily a big problem. There could even be great benefits from it. Many people with long-term illnesses have had to cope with lot longer than that, of course, where they've been housebound for many months, sometimes years even, with very restricted contact with other people often. But the idea of that being something that everybody has to do all the time seems extraordinarily extreme, and I don't see evidence to justify any of those things at all. From the evidence that I've looked at so far, that it would seem that this is an infection that doesn't have a high mortality rate, no higher than influenza really, but that we're not really accurately able to say and know, because we don't actually know how many people have this alleged COVID-19 or a coronavirus, you know, because we're not testing absolutely everybody, and relatively mild cases won't be tested, so there could be a lot more with it, but meaning a lower mortality rate, because people with serious conditions will tend to sort of be tested more. But from my research, coronaviruses are fairly common, actually. They make up something between 7 and 15% of all kind of infectious, respiratory infections, at least, according to one virologist that I was reading the accounts of. So it's a fairly common thing, actually, that has been common for many years, in fact. Now, the European mortality rate, they publish records, data of all the different countries, of their mortality figures, and they didn't record any kind of substantial increase. In fact, there was a slight decrease in the overall mortality rates of Europe as a whole. And that's also been mirrored in the UK figures, where in actual fact there's been a small decrease also in the overall mortality rates that are being registered. The deaths registered in the UK, slightly lower for the first 13 weeks of the year compared to the average from the last 5 years. So all this sort of fear and risks of, you know, widespread death and that, we're not seeing that yet borne out in any of the statistics, any of the data being collected. So, you know, you have to... I think there's also concerns about the actual testing itself, how accurate it is. There's a large number of reported false tests that are being recorded, like with Lyme's disease, and many other testings not infallible, and sometimes, you know, there can be false positives, for example. I know there's recommendations from the CDC. They're saying that even if it's presumed to be COVID-19, then it should be recorded as that, even if the symptoms haven't been tested, but its symptoms seem like that. But the symptoms are so similar to other infectious, you know, respiratory infectious diseases, so similar that, you know, a presumption shouldn't be lumped in with an actual positive test. So you can't. So how sure can you be if even the CDC are giving those guidelines to record presumed deaths as actual deaths of COVID-19? So that itself seems to be quite bizarre to me. I'm just sort of backing off crossing this bridge at the moment because somebody's coming through and I just want to let them sort of pass. But the other concern is that the vast majority of people that are being reported with it, in fact nearly all of them, well over 90% have many other pre-existing conditions and serious illnesses too, to the extent where it's hard to sort of know, therefore, whether in fact that COVID-19 plays any contributing factor at all, or whether it's something that they happen to have along with other secondary infections or other serious conditions like COPD, for example, that makes it much harder to get over an infection. So, we really can't be sure the extent to which COVID-19 or coronaviruses in general, the extent to how much an influence that plays in somebody's death. So we just don't know, actually, is the answer to that, really. But oftentimes, I suppose you do know if somebody's had a long-term chronic illness. So even if somebody traces positive for something, that's being recorded too, without necessarily considering all the other illnesses that they have. And as I say, the vast majority of recorded deaths to COVID-19 have got comorbidity. They've got a number of other serious long-term health conditions that could well have caused the death alone. So there are a number of concerns about the illness, having looked at it through the research. And I know that there are lots of doctors and virologists that are equally concerned about that. It's not just some sort of wanderer in the wilderness ranting. It's a deep concern that's divided the medical community, and I think that, I suppose, is the concern that perhaps these extreme measures aren't necessarily being justified by medical sound research. If there is disputed research, then it seems really strange that we're not having that discussion more openly. But I'm trying to sort of investigate and find out more about it, and I'd encourage others to as well.